Hello, I'm Daniel Frankel, co-founder and CEO of NextTMT. On behalf of NextTMT and our media partner, Media Play News, I'd like to introduce Mark Loughney, who's a senior consultant for Hub Entertainment Research, who we work with quite a bit. Mark has a extensive media background, sports media to be specific, Disney, Warner Brothers among his stops.
Mm-hmm.
And Mark is joining us today with some interesting research on Major League Baseball TV usage at a kind of pivotal time. We'll
Yeah.
discuss that. Mark, how are you?
I'm doing great, Daniel. It's wonderful here at the Jersey Shore,
Yeah?
getting ready
How,
for the
how
holiday
hot is it
weekend.
on Memorial Day?
Well, it could be a little warmer, but it's sunny, so it's good.
Isn't that where the big Nathan's hot dog eating contest is? Am I right about that? Or am
That's
I?
that's that's Coney Island. We're here in
Okay.
Asbury Park, the musical home of Bruce Springsteen.
I'm a West Coast Philistine over here in Los Angeles, so I confuse everything. So, but I don't confuse my Dodgers and their astronomical payroll and their TV situation. The backdrop I was referring to earlier is a lot of strum and drang about confusion over where to find live sports.
Mm-hmm.
Charles Barkley complained about it with the NBA the other day. You know, it's streaming in too many places. The FCC is investigating. Well, I guess the DOJ is investigating the antitrust exemption as it relates to the NFL and Major League Baseball. You know, are
Mm-hmm.
they, by moving away from broadcast and into streaming and dispersing their content, are they getting away from the Broadcast TV Act of 1961?
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a major reset of MLB rights that's happening in 2028, just after the NFL resets its rights. So a lot going on with baseball, and you guys have some interesting data. I'll let you take over here.
Thanks, Daniel. It's been confusing times for a lot of sports fans over the last couple of years, and as of opening day this year, and opening day games, the opening night was on Netflix this year, which was a surprise to many Yankees fans here in the New York area, who
Yeah.
did not know where they were going to find their game. They were confused of what time it was going to be on because it was in San Francisco, local time, 3 o'clock, I believe, 6 o'clock in New York. But as of opening day, we see that there are 16 different platforms that you can watch Major League Baseball games on this year. So it's made it a
That's good.
little bit difficult for fans of MLB. And they are telling us in our survey, it's many more of them are telling us that it has become harder to find their games than are telling us that has become easier. There are some people who find it easier, that now it's if they are subscribers to Peacock, or they're subscribers to Netflix or any of the other platforms that the games are on. Some people find it easier, but frankly, it's far more of the MLB fans saying it's been more difficult than easier. And
Right.
we see that with it's not just MLB fans. We're finding that there are fans of some other sports too, who are feeling like it's a little bit more difficult. And believe it or not, MLB is only second in terms of people saying it's much or somewhat harder to find my games than the NFL, which I was a
Right.
little surprised to see that, because the NFL is not on 16 different platforms. And most of their platforms are pretty easy to get if you have broadcast or cable. You can watch them on many of the games are either on CBS, NBC, Fox, or ESPN, ABC. But still, NFL fans are a little confused, I think, because some of the marquee games are the ones that end up, like Black Friday games, end up on streaming, or
Right.
Peacock had one divisional playoff game. So sometimes it's the marquee matchups. I think with baseball, it's just the multitude of places you can watch now.
Yeah. I mean, to some extent, I'm a little perplexed by the confusion, if that makes sense. I feel like, well, this is the world you wanted to live in. I mean, if things had stayed on their trajectory a decade ago, we'd all be paying $200 cable bills to keep up with. Sure, it was all in the same space, but it was we cut the cord because it was getting too expensive. Now we have this sort of fragmented distribution plane
Hmm.
where we have a lot of choice. If you want it holistically every game, yeah, it gets a little bit confusing, expensive, but there's a lot more choice, right? I mean,
Yeah, there's a lot more choice, and I think with the case of MLB, there are a few things, and it's not just going to streaming.
mhm.
The broadcast cable rights have kind of scrambled a little bit this year, where NBC now has Sunday night games where that was on ESPN for decades. ESPN still obviously has baseball, but now it's like a long running habit that people might have of, oh, Sunday night is I watch on ESPN. There's that. There was the collapse of a lot of the RSNs with the financial difficulties that FanDuel Sportsnet was having. So that scrambles things for some of the fans in certain local markets. So I think it's fragmentation, and it's also just a little bit of churn as well in terms of games ending up in places that maybe they weren't expected to be. So I'm looking forward to tracking this. We do this study on a regular basis, and tracking it as things kind of are at a constant for the full season. And what will we see the next wave of the study in the off season? Are people less confused after they've got a full season of 162 games where they are starting to learn where they can follow the games?
I think it's important because I think I'm citing the same study. Things like MMA, which basically moved from pay-per-view to Paramount Plus,
Hmm.
the fan reaction is kind of the opposite. They prefer the new paradigm, correct?
Um,
That's
nothing in our study really shows that they prefer it, but yeah, the what we do find is if it's MMA or other sports that you would consider more niche, and for us, we ask about the UFC, a similar kind of Premier League, which a lot of that is on streaming. That the more niche the sport is,
mhm.
the easier people find it on streaming.
Well, my
So
point is for niche sports, they don't tend to fragment. They may change from linear to streaming.
right.
But in terms of the consumer dissonance, it's not really the fact that it's streaming, it's the fact that it's so fragmented and dispersed,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. I think yeah, that makes perfect sense. That if you just move from one platform to another, that's far less confusing for people than in the case of MLB and the NFL. They've you know they've gone to multiple platforms over the
Right.
last few years, and we're seeing the third highest is the NHL, which it's been about 6 years or so now that they've been on Turner, but they're now on a different platform, and you can watch the games on HBO Max. So that's another sport where the rights have kind of moved from one place to another, even if it's still on cable. So that we've just seen an awful lot of I won't call it chaos. It's not that bad. But
Right.
there is an awful lot of shifting of rights from one place to another, and it takes people a little bit of time to find that. But the good news is if you've got a handful of streaming subscriptions, you don't really have to miss anything. An MLB fan who's got Apple TV and Netflix is pretty well positioned to not miss any of the games that they want to see. Add in uh, a Peacock subscription, and you're pretty well covered.
Well,
And
like a
yeah,
lot of things, it's perceived kind of monolithically. The issue with the NFL to a lot of fans, just general sports fans, is the same with MLB, which is the same with hockey and basketball, but it's not. I mean, the NFL is trying to maximize its revenue by engaging
Mhm,
partnerships in creative ways. And with Major League Baseball, it's very different dynamic. Its situation's complicated by the meltdown of cable and regional sports
mhm.
networks.
Yep.
And it's not greed driving that, it's a forced pivot. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's I think with the NFL, the other thing that sometimes I think we all know this, if we live in a major market that has an NFL franchise, or like New York and LA has two. The NFL has been really smart about making sure that the local market teams are always on broadcast. So even if the game is on Amazon, if the New York Giants are playing on Amazon, they'll also be on
Right.
one of the local broadcast stations. So you never have to miss your local team. And I think that's just how they're really, really smart about making sure that they develop the fan base of the next generation, that nobody has to miss their local team. Baseball, baseball's a little different in that also it's got 10 times as many games. So
Right.
the number of games in a season that are must watch, even if you're the most avid fan, are fewer on a proportion basis than the NFL. So one of the things that we find really interesting is we do ask a question of, would you pay significantly more for a service that gives you exclusive access to a sport that you're a fan of? And the number of people who say I'd pay significantly more is lowest for the NFL, believe it or not, the most popular sport in the US, and second lowest is baseball. And there's another third or so of people who say they would pay a little bit more for that kind of a service. But I think there's two things at play. One is that the NFL makes sure you can see your local team on
Hmm.
broadcast. And the other is, like I mentioned with baseball, is to pay more for an incremental number of games in a 162 game season may just not have the same urgency for people.
Right.
So yeah, I think baseball, football. Actually, if we look at the bottom tier of people who will pay significantly more to watch a sport, it's the four major North American professional sports are at the bottom. Going from bottom up, NFL at the bottom, then MLB, then NHL, and then the NBA.
Because they're already
So
well distributed and people feel like
yeah,
the incremental value just wasn't there.
but if you're a fan of Major League Soccer, or you're a fan of the Premier League or F1, you're a lot more likely. About 1 in 3 people say that they would pay significantly more for a service that gives them access to those sports. So that's another thing that we're seeing, is kind of a separation between the niche sports and what we might call the major sports, in terms of how willing people are to pay a lot more to watch them. So there's that. We also see with avid baseball fans. So we divided our study into avid, casual, and non-fans. And the
Hmm.
people who are the most avid baseball fans also happen to be the people who have more subscription services. On average, they have one more subscription than people who are not fans. They're also more likely to use an aggregator like Amazon Prime or Roku, which
Right.
that also means they're more likely to be going back and forth between subscribing and canceling services before a season or during a season, and then canceling at the end. So what we're going to see over the next few years, if I were going to make a prediction, which I guess I now will, is that there'll be
Yep.
less confusion because people are going to get used to it, especially, baseball fans, because this was,
Yeah.
I think,
We'll show this graphic right now that shows these different over indexing among avid fans. And it's pretty stark. I mean, I'm looking at folks who have a virtual MVPD or a traditional pay TV service.
Mhm.
They're 79% of those surveyed identify
Yeah.
themselves as avid fans have those services versus 61% who are identify as non-fans. That's a lot.
Mhm. They watch VOD more, substantially more, or substantially more of them watch VOD, and that generally has nothing to do with sports. It's so they're also consuming a lot of other platforms for entertainment. So we tend to see that often with people who are avid fans of one thing. They tend to be kind of enthusiastic about a number of things. And we're seeing here with the baseball fans, avid baseball fans are just, they're more likely to be using other platforms for entertainment as well.
Do you have data sets similar for NFL, NBA, or
Yeah,
how
we
do they?
do. Yeah, we do. I did not, I haven't written that up from this particular study because we're in the MLB
Right.
season.
Sure.
So we went and did a deep dive, but we do the study twice a year. So the second wave is kind of a good time to ask about the fall and winter sports because we'll be right in the thick of at that point, NHL, NFL, and NBA. But right now we took a deep dive into baseball fans, and it turns out, as you might expect, there is an awful lot of overlap. You know, 91% of avid MLB fans are also NFL fans. And so they tend to be much higher in fandom of all the sports.
How much, I'm looking at how high the avid fandom indexes on pay TV. I mean, they haven't got the message about cord cutting. If I'm still paying that bill and I've got to now
Mhm.
chase it in other places, that does annoy me. And do you think the dissonance and all the grumbling we're hearing is that?
I think there's a couple of things that go into this. One, the avid baseball fans are considerably more affluent. So to them, a multi-channel subscription isn't as relatively big an expense if you're a non-fan. I mean, the difference in the average income between between a person who is a non-fan and the person who is an avid fan, there's a
Yeah.
$20,000 difference in the average income for those two groups. So I think that plays into it. They're not a lot older. You know, that's been this very stereotype for many years that baseball has a very, much older fan base. And I think that comes from more from the TV ratings on broadcast, which tended to skew a lot more 50 plus. But they're a little bit older. The average is about 5 years older than the non-fans. So that plays into it a little bit. Older households will tend to have more of those subscriptions, more affluent
We're
households.
we're showing this demographic data now, and it's super interesting. And the avid fandom skews 63% Caucasian, which doesn't surprise me. I mean, you could go very deep on the demographics, and I don't think we will. But starting it as a former youth baseball family that was prep baseball family, pretty into it, we noticed that it was an expensive gambit, and to
Mhm.
participate, you had to be kind of a wealthy white kid from the suburbs that helped you. So it doesn't surprise me that avid fandom sort of tracks that way. Does it skew white as much for NFL, NBA, maybe NHL? I don't know.
Again, I haven't looked directly at those, but my recollection is, yeah, that baseball is the whitest of those of NFL, NBA, and MLB, NBA, NFL fan bases. So again, I'd have to look more closely, but yeah, it kind of reflects the demographics of what you see on the field. You know,
Right.
we're kind of at the lowest point, I think, since Jackie Robinson in terms of black players on the field. And MLB is addressing that. They've got initiatives in black neighborhoods to try and get kids to play the game, and maybe at some point it will pay off, but it is certainly not surprising given the makeup of a typical roster that you know there's a fairly substantial number of Hispanic fans to MLB too because there's a lot of Latin ball players. So it
Right.
made sense what we're seeing in the demographics.
The income seems really high too for avid fans. That's got to be a Rob Manfred probably will want to show this during the next negotiation.
Well, I
94.
think yeah, and I think what happens is you see there's a number of variables that probably all contribute somewhat to that. They're a little bit older. They're considerably more male. And,
Right.
we know that typically, again, incomes for men tend to be a little bit higher. So a few things kind of add up there. We didn't really look at urban, like A county versus C and D county, but,
Right.
traditionally baseball, the fandom concentrates around the markets where the teams are. So that's another thing that is probably contributing.
So, you could going back to this issue of there is a huge distribution dynamic
Mhm.
unfolding. The biggest regional sports network, that showed your team's local games, the ones that weren't on ESPN or
Mhm.
Fox, it just went bankrupt. I'm referring
Yeah.
to the erstwhile Bally Sports. I think it was called FanDuel Sports by the end of their lifespan. And so you have all these teams. I think there are about 14 of them that have had to fend for themselves. And with the help of the league, they've formed new distribution relationships. Most of that is streaming, direct to consumer streaming. But
Right?
for most teams, they've blended in relationships with local broadcasters too.
Yeah.
Now that's created a lot of change, obviously, but it's not like you mentioned the NFL being very freely available over free over the air channels. It seems baseball is that way too, or am I overselling that? Are the actual number of games just not matching up?
With baseball, there is this year um, a renewed interest among the fans, at least, to watch on broadcast. The broadcast ratings, on Fox and NBC, those ratings are up. Last I looked, more than 40%.
Wow.
So it may be actually, yeah. I mean, off small bases, of course, relatively small bases compared to decades ago, but and it may be partially because of some of the collapse of some of those regional cable networks that people are now gravitating when they get an opportunity to watch a game on broadcast. But that's one of the things that is a bit of I don't know if you call it a paradox or a contradiction or what we would want to call it, but as much as people are saying, yeah, it's kind of harder to find the games, the viewership is up. So baseball right now, I've seen it written up so many places, is really riding a wave of popularity that it hasn't had in many years at this point. It was obviously a sport with declining TV ratings and the fan base was supposedly getting older, but now it's as popular as it's been probably in 20 or 30 years. And that's despite people saying, yeah, it's kind of harder to find the games. Um, they're they are finding them. It just
Right.
it's just kind of annoying to them maybe, but or they're missing some of the games. I know that the Subway Series games in New York last Friday, was on Apple TV, and Apple TV doesn't have the distribution that a Netflix does or an Amazon has, and so there were some people frustrated by that in New York, but
Right.
they're they're getting used to it. I was listening to talk radio, and they said, "We are explicitly going to stop complaining about this because this is the world that we live in, and we're not going back." So if you care that much about watching every Yankees game or every Mets game, you're going to have to get Apple TV during the season, or you'll miss those 2 or 3 Friday nights that they're on. So um, that's the good news for baseball, and I think the other
It's sort of
sports.
I think Apple does a very good job with its sports, but I kind of understand the argument a little better when I see that folks are complaining about 5 games from the NFL being on Netflix. I think, well, they're in over 70 million US homes. That's better distribution than you have for pay TV.
Mhm.
And that's how most people get broadcast anyway. So it's increasing distribution, not lessening it. But when
Yeah,
I see Apple, it's still, I mean, it's rolled into the big Apple services portfolio, so you never know specifically how it's doing. But I'd be surprised if it had 40 million subscribers at this point. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's
yeah. And the other issue for, I think, Apple more than some of the other services, like Amazon is going to reach you if they want you to know that a sporting event is going to be on Thursday night or whenever it's going to be on. They've got ways to reach you through their. If you go to buy something, they'll be promoting football, or it's on the home screen of your smart TV. I think the issue with Apple in particular when it comes to baseball is they just don't have the same promotional platform, and people just don't know that the game is there. Even if you have Apple TV, you might be unaware that that Friday Night Baseball is there. So I think
right.
there's that too. And same with Netflix. You turn on Netflix and they can just put right up on the home screen for those 80 million subscribers, football on Black Friday or I think is that Netflix? That's the other thing. Even doing this research, I get confused sometimes. If we're not in season, I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
Black Friday games, were they on Amazon or were they on Netflix?
Right, because they're building windows every year. At least the NFL is. They've got, there was 2 international games to kick. I think 1 international game last year, and I think there's 2 this year because they gave Netflix an extra one. So
And they're going to Australia this year, so that's
right.
kind of wild that the games, the time difference will be so dramatically different than the U.S.
So you're Rob Manfred. You've got this invigorated asset that you oversee. It is. I mean, I'm not just saying this because I live in Los Angeles and I follow the Dodgers. That was the most electric World Series I've seen since '75. The Red Sox and the Reds. It was a good series.
Yeah, it
Not
really
taking away from
was.
the series too as well, but they tended to dominate it when they win it. So the product's really good, but distribution, he's got a lot of decisions to make nationally, and he's got to solve this local problem.
Mm-hmm.
So it means a lot more change is likely coming. And it seems if resistance to change gets more irritated, there might be a problem for the league.
Yeah, again, there are some contradictions going on. The game is more popular than ever, but there is that sense of it could be a little bit fragile.
Yeah.
And I would say, we've got the CBA being renegotiated either during the season or at the end of the season, with people being a little bit confused where to find the games. I think a work stoppage that went into the season and canceled games would be worse than any previous work stoppage, because then they would come back and you've got people not sure where the games are. And then there'll be, again, probably there's always a little bit of a backlash and people don't come back immediately. With the game as healthy as it is right now, they can get through without a work stoppage. As I mentioned earlier, I think if we look at the end of the season, I think there'll be less frustration and less confusion among baseball fans because they will have had a year to get used to the current status quo. But you interrupt that with a work stoppage and just feels like the worst time to even, for even a month or two work stoppage, I think would be really terrible given where the fans are right now.
If Roger Goodell decides to just disaggregate everybody else the way Amazon does or Roku does, you take everybody's app, you put it on one NFL app, and you distribute it that way. Maybe that's the answer, or is that impossible?
People would love that. We do a few other studies that aren't really they're not concentrated on sports and sports fans. They're just general entertainment viewers.
Yeah.
And people love the idea of single places where you can find your entertainment. So if the NFL could do that, or MLB could do that, or the NBA could do that, it would be welcomed by fans without a doubt, because we see it over and over and over again with entertainment fans. Because everything is a little bit more complicated than it used to be, whether it's entertainment, trying to watch a movie, trying to watch a series, and there are some things that people would welcome in a moment. And that's one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, so I have no idea where the Dodgers are playing, but I'll figure it out. It's a long weekend. You do the same for the Yankees. Mark, it's huge for you to come on this Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah.
Let's get to the festivities, and we'll get out of here.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniel. And I will be trying to find the Mets game, the Mets Marlins game, which I'll be one of the few people out there probably looking for that game. But
yeah,
that's where they're playing tonight in Miami.
Mets are having a disappointing season, it looks like.
God. I'm speaking of avid fans, I'm a season ticket member.
Yeah.
And this has been disastrous so far.
Yeah, the Giants and the Mets aren't treating New Yorkers the way. Lucky the Knicks are coming through.
Yeah. So that's what I was watching last night. I was watching the Knicks.
Well, I'll watch them too. I think a very exciting NBA culmination with the two conference final series going on right now. So
it is.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, this is just a great time for sports fans, and we'll be talking to them again later this year. So We may have some
Great.
findings you want to see then too.
All right, I'm Dan Frankel, co-founder and CEO, and a bunch of other titles for Next TMT on behalf of our partners, Media Play News, with Mark Loughney, senior consultant for Hub Entertainment Research. Wishing you a great post-holiday, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Dan.